Greetings and welcome to episode 44 of Bible 180, 180 episodes between Genesis and Revelation. We're on episode 44. We're going to do two of them on Psalm 23. The reason we did Psalm 22 in the last episode and two on Psalm 23 is that David wrote about half of the Psalms. There's 150 Psalms. He wrote about half of them. And we're looking through the Bible story chronologically. So Psalms were compiled into the book of Psalms, but rather than going to them then, we'll go to Psalm 22 and 23 right now because they flow into David's life. Psalm 23 is traditionally attributed to David, even though the Bible doesn't record the exact moment that he wrote it. Many scholars believe that David likely composed this psalm later in his life because really it reflects a more mature level of faith in God's faithfulness amidst the trouble that we face in life. David's background as a shepherd also, of course, influences this psalm as he was in quiet and lonely and dark places. That's why he wrote, "The Lord is my shepherd. That's why when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Psalm 23 is personal and devotional, expressing David's confidence in God even through the difficult portions of life. Let me read from you a paraphrase from Eugene Peterson of Psalm 23. He paraphrases it in this way. "God, my shepherd, I don't need a thing. You've bedded me down in lush meadows. You find me quiet pools to drink from. True to your word, you let me catch my breath and send me in the right direction. Even when the way goes through the death valley, I'm not afraid when you walk by my side. Your trusty shepherd's crook makes me feel secure. You serve a 6-course meal to me right in front of my enemies. You revive my drooping head. My cup brims with blessing. Your beauty and love chase after me. I'm back at home in the house of God for the rest of my life." What a wonderful psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. I shall not want. Right? Right. I shall not want. There's nothing I want for. There's nothing I want. Kind of for the most part. I mean, I have some reasonable wants, right? I mean, I want a bigger screen TV. I mean, when I watch football, I'd like a really big screen TV. I'd like my power mower, my riding mower is getting really old. I kind of want a new riding mower. I want a happy life. I want to live in safety and security. I want to live what's best for my children. I want children in our country to have access to education and freedom from fear and guns at school. I want health care for those who are sick, and I want to make it affordable. I mean, I feel like Mick Jagger. I want, and I can't get no satisfaction, and yet those are just my wants. What do we do with the wantings in the world and the consequences of unfulfilled, unrealized, unattainable wants? I mean, we live in a culture that teaches us to say, I want, not only for ourselves, but I want, but the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. For all of the wanting in the world around us, in our personal, private worlds, how do we deal with the consequences of our wants? How do we deal with wanting things? Now, I know that Psalm 23 is so familiar and so ingrained that sometimes the familiarity of it kind of tickles our sentimentality, and we don't hear how challenging the words really are. Kind of like the Beatitudes of Jesus. Blessed are the poor in spirit, the meek, it's kind of platitude stuff that we don't really take seriously. as much as we want our faith to be straightforward and realistic, most of us, faith comes with some confusion at times or struggles at times. Most of us want to keep up the appearance of faith. Most of us want to avoid exposing our doubts and fears, especially when Psalm 23 tells us, I have everything I need. I want for nothing. So maybe it would be helpful to examine Psalm 23 in light of what we think we need. You know, because as Christians, we read the Old Testament, Psalm 23, through the lens of through the New Testament. We read Psalm 23 and realize that Jesus says he is our good shepherd. Jesus, the good shepherd, that's who Jesus said that he is. And the Jesus, the good shepherd, comes not just to explain or justify. Jesus comes to comfort. He comes to comfort and ask us to trust him. The role of Jesus, the good shepherd, is to find people when they're living in darkness and take them by the hand and lead them out and show them their way to finding sunlight again. That's the role of Jesus, the Good Shepherd, to lead us, to guide us, to comfort us, to bring us to the place where nothing in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God. The Lord is my shepherd. Who could want anything more than that? It tells us our most basic need is fulfilled in Jesus. I have everything I want. I have my good shepherd. I have my good shepherd who leads me, who walks with me, who is there with me through anything that my life is going to face. There's three things. I'll return to that in a moment, but there's three things that Psalm 23 teaches each of us individually. First, it realizes that when we follow Jesus as the Good Shepherd, when we want to live with gratitude, when we want to see God's blessing in life, then first we need to rest our bodies. It doesn't take time. If I don't take the time to rest my body will take time to rest itself. With a cold or a flu or a trip to the hospital, years ago, when I used to work with youth, I would be so busy in the summer and going into the fall in retreats and everything like that. In October, usually around the third week, my back would spasm and I would spend 3 days in bed unable to move, and there wasn't enough ibuprofen in the world that I could take to relieve the pain. It was my body's way of telling me that if I don't take time to rest, if I don't take time to rest my body will take its time to rest itself. When the Lord is my shepherd, he leads me beside still waters, and he restores my body and soul. Second thing I like about Psalm 23 when it talks about us is that it reminds us that we need to take time for quietness. It is a busy, loud world in which we live. But sometimes we just need that time by the still waters to revive our soul. We need time for relationships. We need time to rest. Otherwise, stress and anxiety and depression bring us down and keep us from the still waters of life that Jesus wants us to have so much. Third thing it reminds us is that we need to refocus our spirits. If we want God to be with us through everything that's facing us, we need to take time to refocus our spirits. And what the Bible calls that is worship. Worship brings life into perspective. If you're not a part of a church, I really suggest you do that. Worship helps you put things in perspective, because you'll leave having more energy to face what you're facing with calmness and understanding. You need to take time to be with God, not just watching an evening sunset, but to be with God in worship, to sing, to open your heart, to pray with other people, and to be in fellowship with brothers and sisters in Christ. That brings contentment. contentment is a big part of Psalm 23. Being content doesn't mean having no dreams. Doesn't mean you just put up and shut up. That's the biggest reason I never had contentment, because I was always thinking about the next thing that was coming. I used to think contentment meant not having ambition or not having dreams. And I consider myself to be very ambitious. I have a lot of dreams, but I also live now at the age when I'm at with a lot of contentment. Directed ambition toward the goal that God has put in your heart is a good thing. And I believe that God calls each one of us toward the goal of living a more purposeful life. But contentment means more than just being happy. Happiness and contentment are choices. There's always things that will come in our way, but contentment and happiness and in our circumstances is what David calls us to do. Because you realize you don't need more. The sickness of more. I want more money. I want more recognition. I want more friends. I want more. More is not going to bring you contentment. Having more, is not going to make you be more satisfied. Because if you have that attitude of needing more, as soon as you get it, you'll want more. That will not bring you contentment. You have what God's given you to be grateful. Be grateful for what you have rather than always wanting more. Paul says, he says, don't worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And then the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will keep your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. We want more. I have everything I need. I really have everything I need when you think about it. You have already what you need to have a full, purposeful, meaningful, significant life. Having more. All the wants that we have in the world will not bring us the satisfaction and purposefulness and significance that we have right now. So when you decide to make it a great day, when you go to bed at night and thank God for 3 things that happened during the day for which you were grateful, it focuses your mind not on what you want, all the stuff you want, but it focuses you on what you have, and it teaches your heart and your mind to be grateful. And that is something which is very significant. I look forward to the next episode, one more episode on Psalm 23. And until then, just make it a great day and smile and be grateful. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.